Making authentic hi-hats and shakers could be a really big problem. Today, we're gonna fix that. Let's jump in. We will start with this pentagon because this is really the main frame of making a good shaker and hats. Making a good shaker and hats is about two things. First, picking a good sample. I have a video about that. If you want to know more, take a look at here. The more importantly, it's about also making variations. The first thing that you should take a look how to variate the sound so it's not always the same timbre. And afterwards, you should take a look at your pattern so it's not the same pattern all the time. And then you should take a look at the loudness. Also, the length of the sound should change a little bit. And finally, there should be some type of effects imitating the drums in a real life. A room, a delay, modulations, and so on and so forth. Understanding why is more important than how you achieve all those different things. But I'm going to show you now also how you can make it. So we have this loop over here. We need to make a high end to take this to next level. I'm going to do the 16 hats, and the other one we can quickly take a look to avoid doing the same thing over and over again. So the first we have a sound like this. It's actually open hat, but we are just taking a small piece out of it. And then 16 hat comes from the 16 pattern. Now, if you take a look at our pentagram, the first thing is about the timbre. The sound is not always the same. There are different ways to do it. The common method will be duplicating this one and creating different alternatives, and then you can switch between those. I have a video about that here. Take a look if you want. But there's also other way by modulating the sound so the timbre changes all the time. If we go to controls, we have this detune option. The sound changes if you detune it. To make it modulated, easiest way to introduce an LFO and map this to the detune option. And then we're going to go to rate and put in the 16 as well, and then random. Now take a look at here. Timbre of the sound changes randomly all the time. We can do one more cool stuff. I'm going to also introduce a vocoder. Take a listen now. A bit shorter. Now we can also do the same thing. Click this one and map the drive it option over here to our LFO. Let's change the direction and amount. Now listen how these two change the timbre so much and make it much more authentic. Really boring, isn't it? Now, much more interesting sound. The next one is actually pattern. We can change the pattern so it's not always the same. Or we can make the pattern so it's more like humanized. You go to your groove library, pick anything. If you don't have anything, you can actually add it here. But in this case, I have this groove and I'm gonna add this one. And take a look at the positioning of all these. Also change the velocities a little bit. For now, I'm gonna zero out the velocities, but now the sound becomes like this. We have this groove going on and making it more humanized. Another thing I'm going to do is actually change the slightly pattern over here so it rolls a little bit. And now we have something like this. The 16 hats gets more and more interesting. And the next, loudness. So here comes the velocity. We can actually change the loudness by using different samples, modulating the loudness level, or simply playing with the velocity so the velocity controls the loudness of each hit. Again, you can actually do it by importing groove, quantize back, and import one more time. And now we have something like this. You can play around a little bit to make it a bit more authentic. I play a little bit more so it's like the increasing feel. Really cool, we are getting there. And the next step will be the length. So the length you can either play with your ADSR envelope, attack, decay, sustain, or you can also just simply change the start and end point of the sample as well. What I want to do, just play a little bit with the attack. So we do map, sample, fade in here. So it is too much at the moment. We're gonna decrease that, keep it really minimal. Right, just that small amount, depending on how much you want. And finally, the effects. You can either use external effects or for the 16 hats, for example, the panning could be very useful. There are a couple of ways to do it. You can either go to controls and use this. But this time I want to control it a bit more. I'm going to bring in an auto pan and I want it to just go right and left all the time. Increase the amount, and here the shape, if you push it up, it turns into kind of a square wave, right? And you can go something like this, 8th or 16th, or maybe more random like this, something like this. Now take a listen how much difference it made in the end, all these small changes. Before, Really huge difference. If you're enjoying the video, please consider like and subscribe. It really helps a ton. This one was just only 16 Hz. The same rules applies for any percussions really. In this case, we have this off hat. First thing, the timbre changes. Now we are applying another technique. We have a distortion, but we are playing with the drive of the distortion and assigning it to the LFO. So every time the distortion amount will be different for the hat. Take a listen. Creates this extra difference in the timbre. You will also see one thing different here. We have the alternative hats made from the same hat for the different length. This means that we can use alternative timbres when we need it. And this brings us to the pattern. If you open up the MIDI channel, you will see that we have this pattern alterations leading to other samples. Take a listen here. Pattern and timbre alternation in the same time. Next, the loudness. Velocity is changing a little bit depending on what we are looking for. It has a less variation, but the main loudness variation comes from these extra patterns. Really humanized feeling. Next one, the length. This one is also pretty cool. We are using a transient master. So what we have is a 4-bar LFO. So this increases the attack of the sound, hence the sound gets pluckier and pluckier further we go in the 4-bar loop. Take a listen. Right? Let me exaggerate. Right? This is also very useful for other percussions if you want to change the perceived length a little bit during the track. Final trick, the effects, and this time we are using a room effects, room plate over here and sending the sound over there. You know? This provides us the room feel that we were looking for. Now let's take a look example for the shakers. This time the timbre is created by taking different pieces of the shaker and pinning them right up left a little bit, right? And then we go for the pattern. Again, those extra timbres actually helping us quite a bit with the timbre and a groove on top. And then we have all those extra shakers giving this really cool pattern to us. The same idea over here using values to maintain the loudness difference. Also keep in mind that actual loudness of these two are also different. Then we come to the length difference provided by these different samples, giving us this length variation. You can definitely use here transient master as well, actually playing with the tail instead of the attack. But I wanted to keep it simple because these extra modulations not to impress your producer friends but make a better sounding high end. So hence I'm trying to keep some parts a bit more minimal or simpler to create more comprehensive sounding high end. And final piece, of course, the effects. We are using a delay, it's a really small one, right? Creating kind of room reflections. And finally, if you put them all together, they sound like this. The one thing you should remember that you should always listen back and forward to find a pattern that actually fits to the other patterns that you have in your track. And altogether, take a listen how much difference this high end makes to the drum loop. By the way, do you know that all these training files that I'm showing in the videos are actually available on my Patreon? You can actually become my Patreon and immediately download hundreds of different training files to help you inspire and learn even more. You can find the links below on the description.